We're in the middle of a short series on time, the Bible's view of time. As modern Western people, we have a very particular view of time. It's about hours and minutes. We want to manage them. We want to get the most out of them that we can, and that means oftentimes cramming as many tasks into an hour as we can possibly fit. And last week we saw that if we want God's wisdom for how we use our time, we have to start in a different place. We can't start with hours and minutes because God doesn't think that way. When he looks at human life, as we saw last week, he sees a fallen world, a world that is stuck in cycles, destructive cycles, a world that is not going to change until Jesus comes. A world that is dead in sin, and we are in that world, and when he wants us to confront how to use the time he has given to us, he first of all wants us to confront those limitations. And we saw this from Ecclesiastes chapter 1 last week. This morning, we want to consider this a little bit further. If this world is stuck, if this world is dead in sin, and if it's not going to change until Jesus comes, what then should we do with the time that God has given to us? Redemption is in Christ, and his redemption of our hearts, his changing of our hearts, is to have an impact on the world around us. And that impact is to go on, and his kingdom is to extend until Jesus comes and sets it up finally and ultimately. Let's talk about how time works in that kind of sense. How does God want us to use the time that he has given to us here? And for that, we look at this famous passage here. This controller is not working. I need the slide to advance. We look at the ant. Chapter 6 of Proverbs and verse 6. There they are. Those are the guys I was looking for. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Right away, we know that whatever else we're going to learn in this passage, it will not be PC. This will not be polite, because we're starting out with the word for someone who is sluggish, someone who is slow to get moving, someone who does not take action, the procrastinator, the person in despair, the person who doesn't believe their decisions and actions make any difference. And we call that person, Proverbs calls that person, the sluggard. And it's not polite and it's not kind. This is reality coming at us. And the exhortation here is, O sluggard, go to the ant and watch what the ant does. We're going to have see three qualities that Solomon brings out about ants. This passage does not say go to the aunts. Aunts are different from ants. That would be a very different passage. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to your aunt, but here we're talking about the are ants insects? Okay. I just don't want to say anything wrong in the presence of experts. Go to these insects, ants, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. There's something we can learn from these little creatures. And you know this passage. It's very famous. And we tend to focus on the actions that the ants take. I want you to notice the time signals in this passage. First of all, without having any chief, officer, or ruler, the ant does what it does. Needs no commander, needs no motivation, no incentives, nothing. The ant knows what to do. The ant is decisive. One of the things that God expects of us in our lives is to become more and more inner directed, as opposed to outwardly directed, as opposed to people deciding for us how we should use our time and telling us what to do with that time. The scriptures are calling us to gain that wisdom to say, no, I decide what to do with my time. It's in me to do, and I need to make that decision. So go to the ant. This ant doesn't have any chief, officer, or ruler. And without any leadership at all, she prepares her food and her bread. She gets ready, and she works without direction. As you know from previous things we've talked about in this series back in the fall, I am not a fan of the kind of Christianity that tells you, don't make any decisions yourself, never do anything until God tells you to do it. Not a fan. I think if you want to be a despairing Christian, take that route by all means. Proverbs, and I believe Jesus, as the voice of wisdom in the whole Bible, is calling us to be decision makers. To say, I know what needs to happen, and I know how to do what needs to be done. I'm going to do it. I'm going to engage, and I don't need direction. So I'm always kind of puzzled, frankly, when churches talk about wanting to seek the Lord's will. Haven't we got it? Don't we know it? Haven't we received it? What more do you want? I mean, do you want the voice to come from heaven, and you want neon signs, you want lightning and all of that stuff? I don't. I think we have enough information from God to make good decisions about what we are supposed to do. God has called us to be people of agency and of decision and of decisiveness. He's called us to be inwardly directed by His wisdom. So, if you are the type of person who has always felt a little bit crushed because you're action-oriented and everybody's always telling you, wait, slow down, pray first for 40 days and 40 nights before you do anything. If you're that kind of person and you're frustrated as a Christian, join me. I am frustrated too. Let's take action. Let's be decisive. Let's do what has already been given us to do by God's revelation in His Word. There's a second characteristic of the ant in this passage. She knows the season. She's farsighted. She's looking down the road in time, and this ant thinks in terms of seasons. Now think about that. This is the time signal that I wanted you to notice. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. There is a time to move. She knows that time. And when that time comes, she moves. She knows the season. There's this phrase going around on social media, do you know what time it is? I would rephrase it slightly. Do you know what season it is? Let's think about how this expands our view of time from minutes and hours to big blocks of time in our life. This means that what we're to learn from the ant is to think in terms of those larger blocks of time. Those larger stretches of time, stretches of months, maybe years, whole seasons of life, if you know what to do with those large blocks, you have a lot of information about how to spend your minutes. And we're going to develop these ideas. I would put it to you that one of the reasons we may be lost in our use of our minutes and hours and feel overscheduled and overwhelmed, overtasked, too many things going on, one of the reasons is we don't know what season it is. What are all of those tasks for? What are they about? What's their purpose? The Bible shows us here that there's an ant operating decisively without any management or incentives because she knows the season. And what she does in one season, a big block of time, prepares for the next season. So that when she gets to the next season, she's ready. She's well provisioned. Everything is set because there's months and months of work, perhaps years of preparation that goes into this. Third characteristic, the ant is steady. So if we think about summer's a long time for us here in Ithaca. It's probably not long enough. And it's too far away, especially today. She prepares her bread in summer. So let's say 3 months. What does that mean? So I'm going to give you the non-technical Rayleigh version of ant life. You got to prepare some kind of place for food. I don't know what they do. I don't know how they do it, but I know that they do something like this. They prepare this place, and then they go out and they get the food. This is really very simple, but I'm on track. Yes, good. So they go out and they get the food, and who knows what it is, but they collect it. And how do they get it back to the place that they prepared for the food? They walk it. They pick it up somehow, and they carry it. And how often do they do this? Over and over and over and over again. Repeatedly, steadily. So the ant is decisive, needs no incentive, no manager to say, get up, it's move the food day. You get points for moving more food. No, there's no manager. There's no motivation. There's just do it. It's decisive. You're going to do it for 3 months in this period of time. And then you're going to do it every single day, multiple times a day. What is this? It's lots of little, tiny actions repeated over a long time. Your reaction may be, ant life is boring. I don't know. Maybe it is. But they live, and they don't die because they do this work. There's something about our lives. We have a margin where we think we can spend a little bit of idle time over here, a little bit over there, a little bit here, a little bit there. Pretty soon you're talking real time of idleness. And we think that something is going to come along that somehow supplies what we need by magic for the idle time that we spent that we need. And we always have some reason why we need this time. Me time, self-care time, whatever it is. And so we are operating as rich people with this concept of a margin. And Proverbs is saying, you ain't got one. I know you think you have one, but there isn't one. There's a season you're in, and there's stuff that you need to do in this season every single day, steadily. And if you do that, you will be well provisioned for future seasons. But if you don't, the season is gone. 3 months of work every day, gone. Can't get it back. And no magic is going to bring it back. Now, we're going to unpack some of this thinking as we go on. But I just want us to think about a proverb we looked at a couple of weeks ago, Proverbs 13:11. Put that back in front of you. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle. If the ants just have a ton of food just sort of dropped right where they need it, and there it is, and they don't have to do the daily work, little by little, to pile up the food, what's going to happen? Is that food going to increase? Are they going to add to it? No, they're just going to be lazy ants, and they're just going to eat it, and it's going to dwindle. It'll dwindle faster than they imagine. This is our approach to life, friends. That if there's something that needs to happen, it can be done later. It doesn't have to be done little by little and steadily. Individuals think this way. Churches think this way. And Proverbs is saying, you lose a season, you have lost something incalculable. Go to the ant. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? The season is on. It's happening. It's right now. And it's only going to last for a certain period of time. Do you know what this season is for in your life? Because it's on. It's going. When are you going to get out of bed and engage in the steady work of this season? Do you know what that is? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. Go to the ant. How do they avoid this? They don't think in terms of margin. They don't think in terms of, I can afford a little idle time here. They think in terms of steady work every single day. Work in season. We could spend a lot of time talking about seasons in the Bible and kind of studying how much this comes up. I'll just leave it to you to kind of get sensitized to something bearing fruit in season. And just notice how often that kind of imagery comes up in the Bible. For the rest of our time this morning, I just want to talk very practically about this idea of seasons in your life. When I was a college student back, whenever that was, 1989 through 1993 were my undergraduate years, I learned something amazing about work. I was just the same as everybody else, feeling overscheduled, overtasked, too much going on, and the multitasking isn't working. And my second semester of undergrad in 1990, it was a very heavy semester. And so I had a ton of stuff that I had to crank out, and it looked like it was too much. So what do? What I realized was I was trying to work the way people told me to work and not working the way I want to work. I didn't have control of my schedule. So I did something with my days. I created seasons in the day. Each day had seasons. You had your morning season, your afternoon season, and you had another block of time called evening. And I learned to dedicate blocks of time to certain tasks. And once I did that, it was amazing. Tasks started getting done. They started getting completed because I started asking the question, well now, what task really belongs here in this block of time? I do this to this day, there are seasons to each day of my week. Tuesdays, I put a season right in the middle of the day for staff. And I do all of the staff interaction, that all of the kind of planning stuff, problem solving, maintenance, communication, all of those kinds of things that we need to do face to face. I do it all in a season on Tuesdays. And it lasts several hours, and it's uninterrupted. It's a block of time. We get a lot done. I use afternoons, large blocks of time in the afternoon for sermon prep and writing, because you've got to get in a certain flow that cannot be interrupted. You've got to start the sermon work, and then you have to go with that work over a period of time. And you can't really be interrupted in it. You can't take phone calls. You can't be doing email. And you can't suddenly pick up this thing and say, I wonder what's happening on Instagram. You can't be doing any of that stuff. You need a block of time. I've been working this way for years, decades. And it has been the key to productivity at very important seasons of my life. It has taught me to say yes. It has taught me what belongs in certain periods of time in my day. This task belongs here. Sermon writing goes in this block of time. Appointments, meetings, other kinds of conversations belong in other blocks of time. And part of it has to do with, when am I really fully engaged and ready to do the work of sermon prep and those kinds of things. Now, you all have different tasks and different priorities. God is giving us a principle here that if you think through blocks of time instead of hours and minutes, you will get more done, because you will know what the purpose of that time is. But it has also taught me to say no. This thing does not belong in this block of time. So you may call me or text me when I'm in the middle of a block of sermon prep. You know what's going to happen? Nothing. Because I've got to keep going with the thread of thought that I'm on right there. Am I going to stop a meeting with staff and all of those conversations? Am I going to let that grind to a halt because I suddenly remembered some stray detail that I need to look up in a book? No, we're in a flow here. We're working well, and we're going to keep going with what belongs in that block of time. So, thinking in seasons teaches you how to say yes. What belongs in this time teaches you how to say no. It also teaches you how to say, this is later. This doesn't belong here. It belongs in another season. It's going to come later. I'm not saying no. I'm not saying never. I'm saying I'm going to get to this later. Now, we've been talking about blocks of time during a day. Let me expand it. Sometimes there are seasons in your life, periods of years, where certain kinds of things are happening to you, in you, and through you. And you need to understand what those years are for. And if you understand that, then you can work steadily toward the goal of that season of years. You can say yes to things. For me, when I was a student, I realized that these are years of preparation, and I don't want to waste these years. This isn't just about taking classes and going to school and reading what they tell you to read. I started reading projects when I was in college that continue to inform me to this day, and I spent years on those. One of those, I just started reading about the 19th century and the connections between the 19th century and the 20th century. I wanted to know, why is the 20th century the way it is? It was in the present back when I was a student. Now it's in the past. How did it get to be that way? Well, let's look at the century before, and let's just read. Let's just take in all kinds of stuff. I read biographies about 19th century figures. I read articles. I read history books. I read a lot of 19th century novels. It sort of did a deep dive, imagining that this work of preparation would help me and inform me in whatever I had to do in the future. So I did a little bit every day for years. Just a little. Few pages, maybe 10, maybe less. A little bit of reading over a period of years, concentrated on one theme. And these are perspectives that I still use today. All of those books, I still use them. I'm still going back to this period, this season of preparation in life, because I said yes to a certain kind of work. Young people, what is this season in your life for? What are these years for? If you embrace that question, even if you're out of college and into your profession, embrace that question, what are these years, these early years for? If you do a little bit every day for years on that purpose, you will look back on a substantive body of work. That is powerful. It will compile, it will deepen, and you don't know, and I don't know what that preparation is even for. You don't know what it's for immediately. You don't know what it's for 10 years, 20 years from now, but it will have an impact on your life. Embrace seasons, and they will tell you what to do with your minutes. Now, the big seasons of life also tell you what to say no to, or later. I'll give you an example of this. For years, I was a semi-professional violinist. I played in orchestras, chamber music concerts. I did solo recitals, and for the last 6 years, since 2019, was the last time I really performed professionally in public. And in those years, so many other things have crowded in, and that kind of performing has been forced to the back burner, that I am confronted with the fact that these are not the years, this is not the season for me to pursue more performing opportunities. In particular, I know what this season is for. I've had some injuries, as many of you know, and so I'm wrestling with some things physically with my hands. I need to rework a lot of technique. Maybe I will get some performing years back. I hope so. I miss it, but I do know that right now it's later. There's a season for every activity under the sun. And so you have these painful times when you say, but this thing's going away. We're seeming to. And it can be grievous. But if you embrace the season and what the season is for, then you know what to do with your hours and minutes in that season. Right now, I am saying no to performing. I'm trying a little bit here and a little bit there, testing different things, and mostly discouraged. And so I know that in this season, an hour a day of retooling on the violin. That's the work that this ant is going to do, carrying things back and forth and storing it up. It's painful. But I won't do it any other way, because that's fighting the season. And if you fight the season, you're making a mistake. Let's think about this a whole different way. Relationships. What is the season of life that you are in terms of relationships? Now, in all of the seasons of my life up to this point, I have never neglected my family relationships. Bridget and I have had a date every single week for decades. And where we just go out and do something. I have made similar time for my two sons. And, that season is different now for a variety of reasons. I don't get the amount of time that I used to get with them, but there was a season for that. And so now there's a different kind of season for a different kind of relationship. But if you don't understand that in every season your relational work has to go on day by day, you're going to become a very sad, bitter, lonely, and miserable person. I want to say this in particular to those of you who have a cause that you're fighting for. I would say, because your cause is important, know the season of your life. If there's some justice issue that you want to pursue with your life, then there's something very important you need to know how to do. You need to know when to say, enough. I've done enough today. I've done what I can. And when you think of your life in those kinds of seasons, then you can say with Proverbs chapter 3, I haven't lost sight of the task God has given me. I haven't lost sight of the work. I'm doing it with sound wisdom and discretion, and I can walk on my way securely. My foot will not stumble, and I can lie down and not be afraid. So many people today cannot stop their work. They can't stop it for relationships. They can't stop it to rest. And when they do get a respite, what they do with it is they put in a season of entertainment instead of resting and stopping and being secure in what God's plan is for your work and your life. Seasons are extremely important in your effectiveness in life. Seasons are more important than your hours and your minutes. Work and think in terms of seasons, and you will know what to do. You will be more decisive. To that end, let's confront a couple of questions that this raises. Do you know what season it is with God right now for you? Do you know what that is? And that's not a rhetorical question. That's something I want you to consider. What is your walk with God to be in this season of your life? A period of years, every day. Are you being pulled away from people? And you find yourself walking alone? That's a season in your life. It's happened to me many times. What does that season imply for your walk with God in those years? Are you being pulled toward people? Are you being pulled into a serious, lifelong romantic relationship where there's a future of children and family and all those things? Are you being pulled into that? What is your walk with God to be in that season where you're starting a new life with a new partner and potentially a family? Do you know what season it is with you and God? If you're older, do you know what season it is to walk with God in retirement or in the sunset concluding years of your career? You know what that purpose is. What has God called you to in relation to Him for that season? The things you're going to repeat every single day. I'm asking you to evaluate where you are with God in this season. What is this season for? What do you think God has called you to do in relation to Him? And then the follow-on question, what are you being directed to do? What does that look like every day? Or maybe I could put it more specifically. What grace from God do you need every day in this season that He has you in? If you have answers to these questions, even the beginning of a sketch of answers to this question, you know how to use each day. You know what to do better with your hours and minutes. You know what your purpose is in this season of life. The Bible speaks in terms of seasons. It does not do hours and minutes. Our hours and minutes are directed by the bigger blocks of time and the call of God for the purpose of those blocks of time in our life. So that's our idea this morning. What about, oh wow, we got a lot of questions. I'm not going to get through all of these. I'll take a couple and then I'll make a video. In reference to seeking the Lord's will, what about the verses that talk about seeking the Lord for wisdom? What about the spiritual gifts and individual calling on each believer's life? For example, some Christians, but not all, may be called to overseas missions. So, question back to what I was saying about seeking the Lord's will for your personal engagement in life. I would say it would be very useful for you to take this evaluation question, what season is it for me and God right now? Take that question to the people around you, the people who know you, and ask them what they think about it, and seek their counsel. If you do that, I think you'll be really genuinely seeking to apply the Lord's will to your life. What I don't want to get into, or what I don't want you to pursue, is just a lot of empty introspection under the name of prayer, where I'm just asking myself all of these emotional-based questions, and I'm calling that prayer, and I'm calling that seeking the Lord. I don't know what you're going to find. Go outside your own head. Talk to the people around you. Seek the Lord's wisdom in that way. I'm all for it. And that is ultimately the way we find our personal callings. How do you think Corinthians 6:3 plays into our need for decisive action? Do you not know that we are to judge angels? How much more then matters pertaining to this life? Interesting question. This is a question about a case where a church is just kind of saying, well, stuff's going on in our church and there's all this conflict, and what can we really do about it? And Paul is basically saying, it's your job. You know how to pastor people through these conflicts. And you know, or you should know, how to disciple people toward repentance in all of these things. And so there are significant issues there. I think 1 Corinthians chapter 6 is a good place to go for that. For now, I need to wrap up. So, again, what season are you in? What block of time has the Lord given you? And what do you think He has called you to accomplish in that block of time? What will you do every day toward that purpose?